everyone, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 1, Episode 10, Why Having AEs Determine If a Meeting is Qualified is Not Such a Great Idea, and What You Should Do Instead. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you go to flipthescript.co and download the deck for this session so that you can follow along. But without further ado, let's jump in. Let me go ahead and start off this session with a disclaimer. I love account executives. I think they're one of my favorite people in the organization. There's something to selling that I have an insatiable, and I'm not saying this just so you don't hate me in the comments, that I love about selling. It's gritty, it's fun, and the people who do it, I have the utmost respect for. But this session is not about personality and loving and liking. This session is about structure. There are 5 different things that you're going to have some negative consequences whenever you have an AE who is qualifying an appointment. So there are typically 2 different things that an AE is measured on. Number 1 is quota attainment, and number 2 is conversion rates. Sometimes sales cycle, but those are the top 2 that people really care about. Specifically, number 1, is my account executive hitting quota? So let's break it up into 2 instances. A rep who is hitting quota and a rep who is not hitting quota. If I am struggling to hit quota, then the first thing that I typically want to do as a human being is pass attribution. I want to say, yes, I can work on my skill set, but I need somewhere to point a little bit of the blame or accountability. And so the first place I want to point is basically that the SDR team or whoever's supplying me pipeline, it just wasn't high quantity enough, or you guessed it, quality enough. So a great way or a temptation to do that is to say, like, out of these 10 appointments, okay, 3 were really, really qualified. They were great appointments and I sneezed at them and they closed. 3 didn't have the right tech stack. And then there's this delta of 4 appointments that weren't amazing fits, and I had to dig a little bit, but on paper, they were qualified. I had to sell a little harder. I had to run a little bit more of a follow-up game, but they were actually qualified. That gray zone is where you can really, it makes or breaks reps, right? So you have 4 appointments where basically they are qualified on paper. And if the accountability is on the account executive of like, okay, I determine whether this meeting is qualified. If I'm a rep that's struggling to hit quota, I'm going to have a very severe temptation to say, these 4 appointments weren't qualified because I don't want them counting against my quota attainment. And I want to say like, hey, part of this blame is that I didn't sell that well, but another huge part of the blame is that I only got 3 appointments this month that were actually qualified. And so one of the deep down temptations is going to be to say, if I'm struggling to hit quota, then I want to say that it pass a little bit of the blame to the adjoining departments. The second case scenario, if I am hitting quota as an account executive, if you're a seller and you're a good seller, then you always want more and better pipeline. That is what is in our blood. I was a seller for 6 years, and every single day that I woke up and I was selling, I wanted more and better pipeline. I had a self-prospect as an AE, but I thought I always want more and better appointments because there is no harm in more appointments. So even if I'm hitting quota, then I'm going to want to say like, okay, out of these 10 appointments that came through, 3 were really qualified. 3 didn't have the right tech stack, so they weren't qualified. I have this delta of 4. But as I move up pipeline, meaning if my pipeline starts to bump north and north and north, instead of saying like, hey, I have too many appointments, I'm going to pass them to the other account executives, I'm just going to start to naturally raise the bar on what I say is qualified, because I want to basically make time for the best fruit. Most account executives won't say like, hey, stop sending me meetings, right? They're just naturally going to gravitate towards saying, I only want to take the vice president from ADP, for instance, and this, frontline manager from someone who is just 100 employees, even though they are qualified, I want to disqualify them because I want to get these better appointments, right? So in both case scenarios, whether I'm struggling to hit quota or I'm excelling as an account executive, I still have the reasoning and the motivation to say like some of these 4 delta appointments in the gray area are not qualified. That's reason number 1. The second negative ramification is, or reason you have incentive to disqualify appointments as an account executive, is you are measured on conversion ratios. So let's say I have 10 appointments and I am measured as an account executive on quota attainment, sales cycle, and then conversion ratio of out of those 10, how many was I able to convert into a closed won book of business? it's a good way for my manager to say, like, here are the reps that I need to work on, here are the reps I need to PIP, and here are the reps I need to take to President's Club. So if I'm measured on conversion, naturally as an account executive, if I'm smart, I would say, like, hey, there's going to be a certain amount of appointments that were qualified, a certain amount that weren't, and there's the gray zone. I typically, because I'm measured on conversion, I want to wait all the way up until right before something closes to say that it was qualified, because I want to bump up my conversion rate. So if these 4 appointments, are in the gray zone and I'm not sure whether I can close them or not, even though they were on paper qualified, I have incentive to disqualify them, because I want to make sure, or I have incentive to disqualify them, worst case scenario, best case scenario, to wait right before the close and I'm sure that they're going to close to qualify, so that I can bump that conversion metric up and look a little bit better on paper. So, again, nothing wrong with the account executive, just the structure of how we're measuring them, and the structure of how we're giving them a quota and measuring them on quota attainment and conversion ratio. It can lead to, best case scenario, kind of a fork in the road and like a really tempting battle for an account executive of, I want to make my SDR happy and I want to empower them, but I also have myself to look out for. And if I'm struggling to hit quota, then I want to say, I'm only going to take the appointments. I'm only going to take the prime fruit and the stuff that I know is going to close, so that I look a little better on paper and I have the highest likelihood of keeping my job. The third negative ramification, and I think one that will really hit home from an ops perspective, if I were an operations leader, is there's a lot of subjectivity if an AE is qualifying. So typically when I see AEs, kind of handling taking the reins and determining whether a meeting is qualified or not, you get different opinions from rep to rep. So I'm trying to get out of the way so that you guys can read this, but why don't you just do me a favor and download the deck so you can read it a little bit better. Small writing, sorry, kind of a small slide here. But you are, from rep to rep, you're going to have different opinions on what they think is qualified. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story. I've worked at 3 organizations within sales tech. All 3 organizations, I went to the account executives at different times and I asked them what the qualification rate was for company size, for tech stack, what their understanding of was when they should qualify and when they should disqualify and say this lead didn't make it through, and in terms of title. Every company that I have worked at, the AEs have given me a different story. Not out of malevolence, just out of misunderstanding. So every single rep, even if you train them very, very distinctly, they're going to have kind of a different understanding of what they think is qualified in a meeting. And they can start measuring it on really subjective criteria of like, did this person say that they really want to buy, is a great example. And it's like, well, no, but they didn't say that they didn't want to buy. And so where are we? We're kind of in the gray zone. So the enemy of any kind of operation is ambiguity, right? So you want to make sure that you have really firm criterion. And if you have an AE determining whether a meeting is qualified or not, it's going to be subjective to their opinions. It's going to be different from rep to rep. And the last thing, and kind of a side note, not the most important thing, but an important side note, is that it really, genuinely, deeply affects your SDR team. SDR teams work really hard. They do everything that they can to prospect and to get meetings in front of you. And then they are sitting there on the line wondering whether a meeting is going to be passed through or not. And if it's up to the opinions of a different rep from rep, oftentimes you see territory changes. They get several different account executives in a quarter. It gets let go. Someone changes jobs, etc. It can lead to them chasing around several different people in the organization. Best case scenario, like waiting, to see if the meeting is going to be passed through, which really affects their comp. But worst case scenario, like having no idea, like if it's going to actually happen and just kind of rolling the dice. So I think, something that happens a lot within organizations that I've seen, and I think most people that I've talked to in the industry would agree or have seen it too, is that sometimes you'll see an SDR start to a little bit bribe the account executive and say like, hey, I'm going to build this relationship with them so I can convince them that this meeting was qualified so I can get a little bit of credit. And the AE sometimes will do it just to make the SDR feel better. So all of these things are great in terms of benevolence and great in terms of rapport building and team building, that we're all on the same page and trying to see each other win. Really an enemy to the organization overall, because again, subjectivity can really affect your data and your go-to-market decisions if they're not tightened up. The fourth thing of the why not of letting AEs do it is it's because of point number 3 in the subjectivity, it's going to give you very unstable metrics. Metrics are meant to tell a story. And the more subjectivity that you have within those metrics and the more subjectivity that you have within that data, the less of a story that it tells. So metrics and data need to be clean, they need to be coherent, they need to be hard criterion, they need to be logical. And if all of those things are correct, you can make go-to-market decisions based on them. But what I've seen, especially in B2B SaaS organizations plagued with, is the pass-through is all off, the conversion rates are all off, the data's not clean, they have too many people in their CRM and the hygiene is low, everything's not clear. And so all of a sudden, the board or the CEO or the CRO from the organization or the VP of sales is making decisions based on the data they see, but it's not giving an accurate depiction. So let me give you a little bit of an example, by way of example. I once worked for a team where I had very little marketing. Brand marketing, yes. Demand gen marketing, no. And we had a demo request button on the website, and we were getting a certain amount of inbound leads that were coming through. And so these were coined as MQLs, okay? Demand gen marketer comes in or a growth leader comes in and basically spends, a lot of money on trying to create demand, running SEO, certain ads, LinkedIn ads, etc., and basically growing the MQL number. So the appointment number stayed the same, but the MQL number raised quite a bit in marketing because this person was doing 3 primary things. This person wasn't bad, but 3 primary things of okay, any content download is an MQL, anyone who has a demo request is an MQL, and then also anyone that I buy from a data provider, if I get a name, even though they did no action with my company, is an MQL also, and they are all looped under the same name. So basically what happened is we just bought a bunch of leads from, some kind of data provider, uploaded 10,000 into the CRM, and all of a sudden the MQL number is 10,000, but the amount of booked appointments stayed the same and no one could figure out what was happening. So again, ambiguity is the enemy, especially from an operational perspective. So the more subjective criterion that you have in this case scenario, that's a different scenario, but in this case scenario, any kind of subjectivity that you have can really tear at the roots and the fabric of how logical and the logistics and operations of your company is set up. The fifth is more of a tip, not a point. But the tip is if you don't believe me and you're like, okay, this girl's crazy and she's got blue hair and she talks too fast and says way too much during her videos, go ahead and go into your CRM and do the research yourself. So I certainly don't have the temerity or gumption to say that, this is going on in every organization. So I would go to my ops leader, or if you can pull Salesforce reports, that's awesome. You're way better than me. I would go into Salesforce or your CRM and basically pull and say, okay, when my SDRs are creating appointments for my account executives, what is the conversion ratio from, typically an organization SDR will say, hey, this is a sales qualified lead. And then the AE will confirm and say, this is a sales qualified opportunity, right? So that's the confirmation metric. I would study and break down per account executive what the different conversion ratios are. And if you're seeing anywhere above a 5 to 10% variance between account executives with the same type of pipeline, that's coming from your SDR team, then you know that you're falling victim to this problem. So I've seen variance anywhere from 10 to 90% of account executives. Of one account executive was confirming 90%. One account executive was confirming 10% and saying it was an SQO from the same kind of pooled pipeline from the same SDR team. So that doesn't tell you that one account executive got great meetings and one account executive got terrible meetings. What it tells you is that you have a system that's based, unfortunately, on subjective criterion, and there needs to be a hard line. So that's the why not. Now let's go into a really, really nice topic on when it's comes to the inbound line, why it's a bad idea to bant your prospects. If Keenan is out there and he is watching this video, Keenan, you're my boy, and this one is for you. BANT as a criterion is a great criterion if you're thinking through is a meeting qualified. But if you're trying to ask your prospects all of these questions to get there in the decision-making process, it can be extremely detrimental to your prospects, especially when they're getting to know you right off the bat. For the people out there who haven't heard of BANT, there are 4 pieces of BANT: budget, authority, need, and timeline. So these 4, again, are really great criterion, but you want to make sure that these aren't something that you're asking your prospects right off the bat. So let's kick into number 1. If someone inbounds in a demo request and says like, okay, I really want to buy Drift. This is a great product and I'm going to request a demo from Drift. They're going to come in on the line and they're going to get called from Drift aside. Let's pick a random company. Let's call them Draft. And I want to get the product of Draft. I request a demo and the SDR reaches out to me, and the SDR first thing says, maybe I get a outreach in the first day, maybe I don't, maybe it takes a couple days, and I get an email from someone and it says, hey, can you jump on a call? I jump on the call thinking that it's a demo, and instead of being a demo, I'm ready to buy the product, I've got, budget in hand and everything. Instead of getting a demo where I can see more of the Draft platform, I am met with someone who's trying to qualify me. So the first question that they're going to ask is, number 1, do you have money? So instead of getting a demo of this platform that I need to buy pretty immediately, I'm getting a demo from someone that I don't know who is trying to qualify me and asking me a very intimate question of, do I have money and how much money do I have? Best case scenario, it feels super inappropriate. Worst case scenario is your prospect is super turned off that you called them, and instead of thanking them for requesting the demo, instead of getting passing them through to get to know the platform, you're asking them if they have any cash, because if they don't have cash, you don't want to talk to them. So I get the theory. We want to talk to people who have serious buyer intent and ready to buy our product. But I'll sum it up with this. Asking a prospect if they have budget is kind of like asking a little kid if they are hungry after dinner. They say, no, I'm not hungry anymore. You say ice cream, you have ice cream, and they say, I'll make room. So budget even is a very subjective thing, and prospects will make the room within their budget, for things that they want. So asking them if they have money and how much, best case scenario is a super unreliable metric and kind of a little slap in the face. And worst case scenario, it completely turns off your buyer. Second piece of BANT is authority. Asking someone on that line, so again, they came in wanting a demo of your platform because they want to buy Draft. All of a sudden, they're met with a qualifying call instead of a demo with someone who's asking them who sometimes doesn't even know their business, whether they have money, and then also if they're the decision maker. If someone is a decision maker and you ask them if they're the decision maker right off the bat, then best case scenario, it's going to be a little disrespectful, and they're going to say, yeah, they're going to think in their mind, yes, I am the decision maker, but so what? If I wasn't, would you not talk to me? And so you'll start to see your prospects get what I call the good old swivel head mentality of like, okay, yeah, like I'll answer this question, and yeah, I am the decision maker, but they're turned off by the person in front of them, because the person in front of them is communicating to them right off the bat with your brand that they would only talk to them if they can sign on the dotted line. The worst case scenario is that this person is not the decision maker. So a lot of times, usually a VP won't jump on the line to sit through a demo. A CXO won't take the time to sit through a demo. They've typically, part of their success is because they have gotten into chair by learning the invaluable skill of how to delegate. So a lot of times in purchasing decisions, a CXO will say, hey, I thought I might like this tool, but I'm going to pass this over to the sales enablement team, or I'm going to pass this over to my frontline managers, or I'm going to delegate this out to someone else. Tell me how they're going to use it, tell me what they thought of the platform, and bring their suggestions to me. So if right off the bat in the first part of your interaction with the prospect, basically the prospect, requests a demo, they jump on the line and get qualified, and they're asked if they're the decision maker. A lot of cases, the answer is no, because the purchasing decision, or at least the nascent stage research, has been given out to someone who doesn't sign on the dotted line. But that doesn't mean that that person doesn't have a lot of value and a lot of influence and a lot of stake in the game. And so if you ask someone who is inbounded, who expected a demo and instead was met with these qualifying questions, if they're the decision maker, again, best case scenario, it's kind of disrespectful. And worst case scenario, you have now just disempowered and invalidated the one person who is coming to just check out your platform. So again, I get the intent with trying to find out if they're the decision maker. It's a very valuable data point. My suggestion would be do the research on LinkedIn and find out who they are. And if they're not the decision maker, then find a way to multi-thread. That's part of selling, and that's what makes part of selling fun, is building so much rapport with this person that you can multi-thread, eventually in the cycle, set a prospect pact of like, hey, let's have this meeting. At the end of this meeting, we'll see one of two things. Either we're not a fit and we can part ways, or we are a fit and we typically, would want to involve this person at that point. I saw that this person's name was Tom. Does that, sound like a deal? So you can set a prospect pact and kind of the rules and regulations, but I wouldn't ask someone just point blank the inappropriate question of like, do you sign on the dotted line? Because if not, like, I'm hanging up the phone. Third piece is need. If you're qualifying based on need, extremely subjective. Whether someone needs something or not fluctuates up and down during the day. And again, if like subjectivity and ambiguity is going to be the enemy in any kind of operational or statistical perspective whenever I'm looking at my organization. So I would not ask someone like, what kind of need do they have, unless you're just genuinely curious, which you should be with your buyer, and asking them like what made them reach out. But I wouldn't use it as a qualifying criterion with your account executives. And the last one is timeline. Timeline flexes up and down. I mean, it is right now in September. It is during COVID. And so the timeline of a lot of things have shifted. So if you were disqualifying people based on what a timeline was, a couple of months ago, then we're going to lose a lot of prospects mid-cycle. So I think Keenan, my absolute hero, said it the best whenever he made the post on LinkedIn. And he said, during COVID, how is BANT working for you now? How is the piece of crap as a qualifying metric working for you now? Love BANT, but don't ask your prospects that questions. So now what do? We can't BANT people right in the demo request line. We can't have AEs disqualifying or qualifying, what an appointment is and saying whether a meeting that was sent over by an SDR was really on paper qualified or not. So what do? Because we can't just send over everything to our account executives. We can't just say they have no say in the matter, but we do need some level of systemization, and we need some level of structure and of structuring the decision and making it really hard criterion, so we make sure we get the data we need, without all of the things that we don't with the subjectivity and disqualification process. So the process I would suggest are the following three things. Number one, I would base all qualifying metrics, if this appointment is qualified or not, based off of one question. And that question is blocked by my big fat head. Could your AE sell into this person if they were able to? Do they have the right setup chemically for this AE to sell into them? So for instance, my last company, Chorus, a great qualifying criterion was we needed to work with people who are over 100 people within the organization. They had a certain tech stack with the dial and a web conferencing system. They primarily sold in English because that was what our transcription was in, and they had a title of a manager level and above. So the question is could my account executive sell into this person? So if all of those criterion are yes, they do have a web conferencing system, they do have a manager level title and above, they do have over 100 people, and they do have the technographic setup that we could sell into them, and they show up to the meeting, bingo, that meeting is qualified. So instead of asking ourselves, was there need and timeline and what are all these, for lack of better terms, because it's 10 o'clock at night, hippy dippy, touchy-feely criterion on whether something's qualified in terms of need, I would ask myself one question. What are the criterion that my account executive needs from a very hard, objective criterion basis to sell into someone? And did that person hit that criterion? And did that company hit that criterion? So there's a couple examples in point number 2, but I typically say firmographic and demographic criterion only. Firmographic in terms of company, demographic in terms of role and buyer persona. But the two points that I put here is this the right company from an ICC perspective, tech stack, company size, or industry? And is this the right role for demographics? So you have 2 pieces to roll. Is this the right discipline that you typically sell into? So for my former organization, it would be sales leaders. And is this the right terms of hierarchy? So is it a manager level and above? And then the last piece that I would ask is that the AE, whenever I send over the appointment to the SDR, then the AE basically confirms that yes, this was the right person that the SDR said it was. Yes, this was the right company that the SDR said it was. And did the person show up? And if the answer to all 3 of those questions are yes, then bingo, it's qualified. This circumvents the need for you to ask all these questions to your prospect right off the bat on if they have budget. This also provides the need, if you have the information you need to know as an account executive on whether you could sell into this person, your SDR can pass through the appointment, everyone's happy, and you have stable metrics. So that's it, everybody. Thanks so much for watching the session. If you like this session, then be sure to go to flipthescript.co and you can check out some more sales topics on the website. And if you really like the session, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn and tag us with your top 2 takeaways. But only do those if you're qualified, because I don't talk to people who aren't qualified. Just kidding. No matter who you are, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.